Tonight, government fights off claims Ghana is back to being a highly indebted poor country or HIPC. As NDC flag bearer John Mahama stands his ground on the matter, pointing to the IMF data.
Ghana is back to HIPC status under Nana Akufo-Addo and Ken Ofori-Atta administration.
Categorically, we say to you that it is not true that Ghana has been declared HIPC or has been added to a list of HIPC countries.
Tonight, we fact-check the claims and hear from both sides.
This is Top Story with Evans Mensah.
And Top Story is always brought to you by Gasem Cement, the nation builder, as well as Belacqua. We're just 41 days to the elections. A big debt debate has tonight broken out between the incumbent government of the NPP and the main opposition National Democratic Congress. It claims that Ghana is back to being the dreaded highly indebted poor country. Now, former President John Mahama has made Ghana's current debt situation a campaign issue, pointing to recent data by the International Monetary Fund, the IMF. Listen.
The rate of borrowing by this government has dazed many observers. The IMF in its Sub-Saharan African Regional Economic Outlook forecasts the current rate of borrowing and debt at a frightening 76.7% debt to the GDP ratio. Ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately, it's my unpleasant duty to inform you that Ghana is back to HIPC status under Nana Akufo-Addo and Ken Ofori-Atta administration. But growth in itself will not mean much if the people it is supposed to give improved livelihoods and jobs are left behind. And this we, the NDC, are determined to address. We observe that a vast percentage of Ghana's economy is controlled by foreign establishments who end up repatriating their profits made in this country to their countries of origin. This is why we've decided that the next NDC government will create more opportunities for Ghanaian businesses to grow and thrive. We'll strengthen the regulatory framework and restore and work actively to increase Ghana's stake in the financial sector.
Well, that was last night. Today, there has been a swift response from the government with a categorical denial that Ghana is back to being HIPC. Listen to Information Minister Kojo Ponkruma.
If you have followed media discussions in the last 24 hours, you would notice a new trend showing up. There are suggestions being spread, particularly on social media, that Ghana has been declared HIPC again. I'm sure you would have noticed that a lot of persons are sharing material on social media that whether the IMF or the World Bank has declared Ghana HIPC or has listed Ghana as one of the HIPC countries. And it is a suggestion that the economy is not in as good a shape as we claim it is. For the avoidance of doubt, and because we have also mentioned that we are aware that some persons in the weeks ahead of the election will seek to spread a lot of false information and fake news, it is important to quickly respond to it right here and right now. Categorically, we say to you that it is not true that Ghana has been declared HIPC or has been added to a list of HIPC countries. The Highly Indebted Poor Countries Initiative, or the HIPC initiative, was a particular program that was rolled out by the international organizations, the World Bank, the IMF, and donor partners.
So is Ghana back to HIPC? Well, my colleague George Afe with our business team has been digging into this. He's in fact writing to the IMF for clarity on the matter. Joins me in the studio with more. George, what did you find?
So when I sent the email to the IMF, this is the response I had from them, Evans, and they say that we have been made aware of social media reports stating that Ghana has recently been added to the list of heavily indebted poor countries, HIPC, by the International Monetary Fund. As a result, we'd like to provide the following clarifications, Evans. 1. The HIPC initiative essentially closed to countries that have already reached the completion point. That was one. Two, as you may recall,
already closed.
Yeah,
already closed to countries that have reached the.
Already closed for countries that already reached the completion point.
And Ghana is in that bracket.
And Ghana, we understand, completed the program in July 2004. So the door has been closed. There will never be another opportunity for any country that was HIPC and is coming back again to HIPC. And also, don't forget that these clarifications are done to help the IMF and the World Bank and their policy recommendations and how countries can be helped. As we speak right now, Evans, Ghana has been classified as a lower middle income country. It's no longer a poor country. So there is no way that a lower middle income country can get its debts and I stand to be educated cancelled. What you might be done for you is that, Evans, they might review your service payment conditions. If you're supposed to pay something over a year, maybe they can look at maybe 10 years and spread over. But let me get back to the email again. The
reply they gave
says you. That, as you may recall, Ghana successfully reached the completion point in July 2004. That is two. The list of countries that have qualified for the HIPC initiative since its inception in 1996 are regularly updated on our website, and must is in caps, not to be interpreted as a new HIPC list. It says that the list of countries that have qualified for the HIPC initiative since its inception, that is 1996, is regularly updated on our website and must not be interpreted as a new HIPC list. 4. Any of such interpretation is flawed and may be deceptive. 5. It says that also the recent updates on Ghana's debt-to-GDP ratio has not triggered any decision or action by the IMF, or for ease of reference, you can access the latest issue of the fund's Regional Economic Outlook for the Sub-Saharan region. It says that we would like to take this opportunity to encourage you to seek clarity before actually going out with any information with respect to the IMF. Reserve the right to issue a public statement to make such clarifications if needed.
Okay. So this is the IMF to you.
Yes.
On the back of the controversy. So there is a fact sheet that you still can find on the IMF website, I guess, that has generated the controversy.
Yeah.
And this is dated March 25, 2020. And on that fact sheet, there's a table that is described as list of countries that have qualified for and are eligible or potentially eligible and may wish to receive HIPC initiative assistance as of February 2020. And in that list, it lists other countries, including Ghana. Now, to even complicate it further, this is the IMF, the document. To complicate it further, there is another list. This is the latest list that I use, also on the website of the IMF. Dated, this is the low-income country debt sustainability analysis report of the IMF, dated September 30th, 2020. In which it gives a different categorization when it comes to the debt. This is whether you are high risk, low risk, moderate risk of debt distress.
And if there's one clarity there, that is used for countries that are deemed to be low middle income country. So if you're no longer classified as poor, this is the new approach. And when you look at the debt sustainability analysis, they look at about 7 variables. And debt GDP ratio is just one of them. So you cannot just use one variable to judge that based on the fact that our debt GDP ratio has crossed 70%, therefore automatically we are happy, because it's all about the assets that you have built, Evans. That, listen, countries may have about 90% debt GDP ratio. Do you have enough assets to fall on when crisis falls to pay those debts? And that is where the concern is. Are you generating enough revenue as a country that going forward, you'll be able to fall on that revenue, on that asset to clear your debt?
Yeah, and in that document, Ghana is listed as one of those countries with, and we've been categorized as high. So high debt distress. Now the document, the IMF defines what it means when they say Ghana is high. It's a country in the list of risk of high debt distress. High risk, it defines if any of the external debt burden indicators breaches its threshold under the baseline scenario, but the country does not currently face any repayment difficulties. So we may have crossed a threshold. As we know, one of the threshold is the debt to GDP ratio, and the IMF
revenue as well.
Exactly. They put revenue there. The IMF puts our debt to GDP ratio, and John Mahama touched on that at 76.7%, right? Even that, the Bank of Ghana has a different figure, right, as of July. Per se. We'll come to that.
But let me quickly read
describes that as...
Let me read the 5 to you in the email here. It says that also the recent update of Ghana's debt-to-GDP ratio has not triggered any decision or action by the IMF. So even though they are projecting that one of those variables that they will use in
debt-to-GDP,
our risk status, whether we will now be put into the category where we are a debt-distressed country, it might be too early to use one of those variables to form a judgment that based on that projection, you are now a debt-distressed country, or even if you want to use the old indicators, we are now HIPIC.
Okay, George, thank you. Let me bring in Kojo Ponkrumah, who is the Information Minister, joins us on the line right now. Mr. Ponkrumah, thank you for your time here on Top Story.
Evans, good evening.
I'm grateful also that we can also speak to Mr. Sami Jemfi, who is the communications officer for the NDC. Mr. Ponkrumah, so, I mean, what's the government's reaction to all this? I mean, we've written to the IMF, they've come back with explanation. I'm sure you've heard it.
I couldn't hear all of it because I've been on the campaign trail and there's been a lot of noise here. But briefly, we have known for a while now that in the last weeks to the election, our colleagues on the other side are going to come up with a lot of false narratives, fake news, twisted descriptions, and throw it out to the Ghanaian public as though it is true. As a matter of fact, Ghana exited the HIPIC program, I think, in 2004. From 1996, the IMF and the World Bank have been publishing countries that get in and out of their program. What we have noticed is that the flag bearer of the NDC is going around now, and now his social media teams are amplifying it, claiming that Ghana's mention on that list, which is updated from 1996, represents Ghana now being declared HIPIC once again. First of all, the Highly Indebted Poor Countries Initiative is already a closed program. Secondly, Ghana is not even any longer a poor country, cannot even technically go for HIPIC. Thirdly, if he wants to talk of a country at the high risk of debt distress, with the greatest of respect to him and his economic advisors, high risk of debt distress is a different animal from Highly Indebted Poor Countries Initiative. So what he is telling the Ghanaian public and asking his communicators and his social media teams to spin out and repeat is a total untruth. We are clear that Mr. Mahama and his teams seek to dabble in a lot of that in the weeks leading up to the election. Our job as persons who communicate on behalf of the Republic is to let the world know that this is untrue. The facts are that from 2017 to 2019, Ghana's debt sustainability analysis in general improved significantly. One of them being debt to GDP ratio improved significantly. As a result of COVID, global economies have suffered a backtrack, including Ghana's, and there is a clear program for recovery, which has been outlined both in Ghana and around the world. And finally, the IMF itself has clearly said that now is not the time even to be looking at fiscal indicators or macro-fiscal indicators, because we're in the midst of a crisis and economies have to shock themselves into coping with it and subsequently recover. So simpliciter, what Mr. Mahama and his communication and social media teams and their pro-farms which they've employed are pushing out is not true. It's just like the other untruths they've been pumping out, that a government official was caught with £26 million, which we have explained is not true. It's just like all of the other untruths that they've been pumping out. The Ghanaian public has to be made aware of this.
Yeah, Mr. Ponkrumah, however, the IMF on September 30th, 2020, published the low income countries debt sustainability analysis, where they put Ghana as in the bracket of countries with high debt distress.
High risk
of debt distress. Yes, I mean that clearly cannot be anything to celebrate.
high risk of debt distress. For anybody who has studied economics, public financial management, public accounting, knows that high risk of debt distress is a totally different animal from highly indebted poor countries initiative. I think that's the first point we need to make. It is a risk assessment framework that says that looking at where your debt position is, there is the risk that you could be highly distressed when it comes to repayment of your debts.
In fact, the IMF defines that categorization as high risk if any of the external debt burden indicators breaches its threshold under the baseline scenario, but the country does not currently face any repayment difficulties.
Because it is a risk assessment. And the reality is that currently, Ghana does not have any repayment difficulties. But it is a warning out there that you cannot continue to go up on this trajectory. How did we get here? COVID. Revenues have tanked because economies have been shut down. The incomes to government have slowed down. Consequently, government has had to resort to a lot of borrowing to provide for all it provides for its citizens. But the warning is that you cannot do that forever. And absolutely, we know that you cannot do that forever. And that is why the red flag there is that you are at a high risk of debt distress. And so what you need to do is to put in place a program to recover. So two things. We have already outlined a very clear medium-term recovery program, which ensures that within about 4 to 5 years, we'll be back to the fiscal prudent position that Ghana was celebrated for. That's number one. And then number two, we have also demonstrated that we are already doing better than the program. You have noticed from the composite index of economic activity and the outcomes that Ghana is recovering faster than we have even projected for this our 4 to 5 year program. So the fact that the IMF talks about a high risk of debt distress should not be mischievously interpreted by Mr. Mahama and his cohorts to mean that we are hippie.
Yeah, but our debt situation has become...
Anybody who understands economics and all of this is clear in his mind that the two are not the same.
Yeah, I mean, but isn't the fact also that our debt situation currently has become unsustainable? At 76% according to the IMF. Our
debt position today is not in the best of places because of COVID. And the IMF itself has said that globally, economies have had to borrow significantly to hold their own because of the crisis and the economic implications it has brought. But what is more important? What is your recovery plan? Secondly, how are you doing on your recovery plan? So, Evans, two things very quickly. Our recovery plan is clear that within about 4 years, we should get back to where we were by 2019, which was a significantly improved position from December 2016. That's number one. And then number two, the evidence is that the actuals, not just the projected, the actuals, is that we are doing better than even our recovery program.
I want to bring in Sami Jemfi, who's on the telephone line with me. Mr. Jemfi, so you've heard the response from the IMF when we wrote to them for clarity on this. And in that response, they say the list of countries that have qualified to the HIPC initiative since inception in 1996 is regularly updated on our website and must not be interpreted as a new HIPC list. Any such interpretation is flawed and may be deceptive. Your reaction? That's a direct response from the IMF.
I think that this response from the IMF doesn't negate any concern or statement that His Excellency President Mahama or the NDC has made relative to our debt position. Because President Mahama never said that Ghana has been declared as a HIPC country by the IMF. I don't think anybody in the NDC, I don't think our flag bearer, the former president, has said so.
He said we are back to HIPC.
We are back to HIPC. You understand? That is different from saying that we've been declared as a HIPC country by IMF.
Okay, well, but HIPC is an acronym for highly indebted poor country.
You allowed Kwejo to build this point.
Just for clarity.
Allow me to explain. Because context is important when you are interpreting the statements of people. Okay? Kwejo can engage in semantics and, sophistry to explain away this important issue. What President Mahama was saying is factual, and that basically is that Ghana is back to the same debt unsustainable position that we were at the time we were declared a HIPAA country by the IMF and the World Bank, and we joined that debt relief program. Like you rightly told him, Ghana's debt sustainability ratio as we speak now is not anything to celebrate. It is negative. Our debt position is unsustainable. The IMF has made that clear. There are a lot of independent financial, experts and economists who have also confirmed that indeed our debt position is not sustainable, because we have a situation where the percentage of our debt to the total value of goods produced in Ghana and services provided in Ghana, which is our GDP, is projected to hit 76.7%. Now, if your debt to GDP ratio crosses the 70% threshold and is projected to hit 76.7%, it means that your debt to GDP ratio is not sustainable. And that takes us back to the same place we were at the time we joined the HIPAA debt relief program.
Yeah, Mr. James.
Now, we cannot join HIPAA again because, number one, that debt relief program is over. Number two, we are now a lower, middle income country. Okay? And so, stricto sensu, yes, if you want to engage in semantics, if you want to look at form rather than substance, you can say that we are not HIPAA. But the fact still remains that our debt position is unsustainable. We've got into a stage where about 44% of tax revenue goes into debt servicing. Yeah. And the IMF is decrying that.
Just a few facts, if you may. Just a few facts, if you may, Mr. James. Now, you talk about our debt situation has returned to what it used to be when we went for HIPAA. I pulled up that data. So, in 2001, when we went for HIPAA, our debt to GDP, according to the IMF, then was 61.72% to GDP. Currently, and that's when we went to HIPAA, 2001.
Currently 68.3.
Currently, we are 76.7.
No, 76.7 by December 2020, according to the IMF.
Yeah,
currently we are 68.3.
No, currently, yes. So that is just a factual issue about where we were when
so it
we
means
went
that
to
we
HIPAA.
are even worse off.
No, but
if what you just said is anything to go by. If we were declared a HIPAA country at the time debt to GDP was 61%, then what are we today? That debt to GDP is at 68.3%.
You made the
projected to hit 76.7%.
You made the point yourself that we're no longer poor. We are lower middle income country. And so that changes the dynamics quite significantly, because if you look at Italy, Italy's debt to GDP is 95.55%, but they are not in that bracket. So that alone is not a factor to look at.
That is why I said that is semantics. Let me read to you the tweet or the Facebook post of Ghana's Vice President today, Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia, on the 24th of March 2015, which settles this issue, okay? Because he is deemed by the MP, or he's touted as their economic messiah. Let us listen to what Dr. Bawumia has to say about this issue of HIPAA and all that. On the 24th of March 2015, this is what he had to say. He said, at 67% of GDP, Ghana's debt stock has crossed the critical 60% of GDP level that developing countries with limited access to capital flows should worry about in terms of debt sustainability. In fact, Ghana is right back to the debt unsustainability that led to HIPAA. However, HIPAA debt relief will not be available again. Ghana's status can thus best be described as that of a highly indebted lower middle income country, into brackets, HIMIC. Dr. Bawumia, that is on 24th March 2015. At the time, our debt to GDP ratio was 67%. And so, if at that time, Dr. Bawumia argued that we were back to the same debt unsustainability status that led Ghana into the HIPAA program, why can't our brothers in the NPP, like Ojo Oponkroma, understand that we are back to that same position? In fact, we are even worse off, because today debt to GDP is projected to hit 76.7%.
Yeah, but factually,
the West in the last 20, 30 years since we left, or we successfully exited the HIPIC program.
Yeah, I mean, but factually, if you stick into what John Mahama said, as in we are back to HIPIC, as in highly indebted poor country, that can be accurate now.
How is that different from what
because
when he described us as highly indebted lower middle income country?
Yeah, but that's the point. Lower middle income country, not a HIPIC country.
So you see, you are just focusing on words. The former president on that platform needed to situate our debt position in the right context so that Ghanaians could relate to it. What he said basically was that our debt position currently is not sustainable. That is it. This is a political party which, at page 13 of their 2016 manifesto, promised to reduce government borrowing. Since they assumed office, they have added a whopping 140 billion, almost 138 billion to our public debt with very little to show, because all the money has gone into consumption and corruption. So Joe Oponkroma says that we are in this debt unsustainability position, high risk of debt distress position because of COVID. That is a lie. Because he knows that even before COVID struck in March 2020, we had added more than 120 billion to our public debt. And we have crossed 63% in terms of debt to GDP ratio. So our debt position was unsustainable even before COVID struck.
Yeah, let me put that to him very quickly. Just a second, Mr. JV.
And we are not HIPIC.
Let me put that.
It's neither here nor there.
Let me put that to him, Mr. Oponkroma.
So that our debt position is not sustainable.
Mr. Oponkroma, just on that point about COVID being primarily the reason why our debt to GDP is that high. If you look at the IMF, data that tracks debt to GDP over the years, 2017 they put it at 57.27%. 2018, which is the latest one that they have on their website on the document, they put it at 59.29%, and we know that it went to 60, and now what we have currently. The argument is it was building there and that COVID could not be blamed solely for where we are with the debt to GDP ratio.
Hello, Evans.
Yes.
Do you have a question for me?
Yes, my question.
Because I'm on the campaign trail, I can't hear much.
Yeah, my question is, you've made the point that the reason why our debt to GDP has reached the levels it is currently, primarily is because of COVID. But if you track the debt build-up over the years since, say, 2017, we have gradually, consistently been piling on the debt and increasing our debt to GDP ratios significantly year on year till we got here. So this was quite something that was building up, and COVID could not exclusively be blamed for it.
So I'd say three things to you. First, and I want to speak directly to the people of Ghana, it has become clear and evident tonight that for the fourth time, Mr. Mahama and the NDC have been caught in a lie on economic narratives. The first time is when the IMF found that their former finance minister, Mr. Dufour, cooked the books and fined the Republic of Ghana on the assumption of office of the Kufuor administration. And Ghana had to pay for publishing false data and declaring false data to the IMF. That was the first evidence of untruths that the NDC was dabbling in when it comes to the economy to the international community. The second was when the NDC claimed that the Sino-Hydro transaction that we were embarking on was a loan, wrote to the IMF to declare it as a loan, and the IMF came back and said, again, they were not having the competencies to comprehend how national economics is structured and threw that out of the window and did not add it to the books. The third, hello, Evans, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
The third was when, again, the NDC ran to the public claiming that the government of Ghana was declaring different sets of data to the IMF and to the people of Ghana. And on your station, on Newsfile, the IMF country director had to come in and clear it. That again, for the third time, they were telling untruths to the people of Ghana. That was not the situation. Today is the fourth scenario, where Mr. Mahama claims that Ghana has gone HIPIC once again. And I think the evidence is quite clear that we are not even a poor country. We can't qualify for HIPIC. HIPIC itself is a program that is elapsed, and it doesn't fit into that category. I want to make the point to your audiences quite clearly that the NDC is in the business of telling lies about Ghana's economy. Mr. Mahama is at the head of it. They will be doing it in the weeks leading up to the election. Ghanaians need to know what they are doing and throw it out of the window. That's number one. Number two, debt sustainability analysis, with the greatest of respect to Mr. Mahama, and anybody who knows the least thing about national accounting and national economics, is analyzed in at least about 7 different ways.
Mr. Pankuma, you haven't addressed my question. My question.
I will come to it.
No, if you may, I just don't have time on this. I need you to address my question. You have already a lot of the things you said right now are things that you said before on the show.
I need to make that point.
Yeah, I mean, but you need to address my question for me clearly.
I will. That's my third point.
Yeah, I mean, now
calculated in about 7 different ways, not just debt to GDP ratio. Now, finally, point number 3. Time and time again, we have made the point that if you take time to read the IMF publications, they will tell you that if you include the energy sector payments and the financial sector bailout, Ghana's debt will be at X. That's what we always debate of below the line and above the line. If you exclude them, it doesn't hit those numbers that you are talking about. Why? Because the 2 elements, the energy sector bailout because of the take-or-pay options, and then the financial sector bailout, about 21 billion that we've had to borrow and pay people's money, are one-off items that will not recur. I'm sure your financial analysts will explain that to you. It's all there in the IMF data. And they always make that distinguishing point. So if Mr. Mahama refuses to read that and just go to the concluding tables and seek to hoodwink Ghanaians by saying that Ghana is HIPIC once again, we say categorically, once again, that is not true.
Yeah, but the question remains, why are you taking refuge in COVID when you've already built up quite a significant amount of debt over the years?
Because if you go into the debt numbers, you always see that from 2017 coming, they publish 2 debt numbers. They always say with financial and energy sector bailout and without. If you take without those, we do not cross those thresholds. And I think we've been quite clear. If you look at the public debt reports that have been debated on the floor of Parliament, that have been published, anytime you take out those 2 one-off items, because they are not regular expenditure items, they do not represent our regular expenditure pattern. In fact, it was that thing that the NDC tried to claim was representative of publishing different figures. And the IMF came out quite clear to say that, no, read the bottom line and the footnotes. They always explain that if you include those payments, you will say we have crossed the line. If you understand that they are one-off payments and therefore exclude them, we are not above them.
Yeah, I mean, Mr. Jemfi.
Evans, this. You see, Kwejo is just dancing around the issues. He hasn't answered your question. He made a categorical statement that the reason why our debt position is currently unsustainable is because of COVID. You've confronted him with the facts that even before COVID struck in 2019, our public debt had already crossed the sustainability or the sustainable threshold. We had crossed 60%. It was hovering around 63%. So he cannot blame our debt unsustainability or our high risk of debt distress position currently on COVID. That is number 1. Now, number 2, I will ignore the red herrings he raised about the NDC lying about economic narratives because he knows it is not true. He knows that it is the fact that they've been cooking economic data to the IMF and all that. But the key issue here is that you promised to reduce government borrowing. Have you done so? No. At the time you took office, our debt to GDP per rebased economic figures was around 52%. Today, our debt to GDP ratio is projected to hit 76.7%, the worst in the last 30, 40 years. Was that what you promised? That is that position sustainable for us? Is it good for our economy? Is it good for the Ghanaian? The answer is no. We are spending about 44% of tax revenue on debt servicing. Is that good for the economy? Is that good for the Ghanaian? The answer is no. Now, what Ghanaians are even interested in is that if you look at this unprecedented debt accumulation that we have seen in the last almost 4 years under President Akufo-Addo, what can they pinpoint? What can they show to justify this, high debt accumulation? Can they show one hospital that they have built with the millions they have borrowed? Not one. They can show even one hospital they have built. They can show one secondary school they have built. They cannot show any tangible, projects that they have undertaken for the benefit of the people. You cannot talk of projects that can pay for itself, projects that can generate revenue, to pay for these debts, so that these debts don't become a burden for future generations. Wasted all the monies on 125 ministers and over 1,000 presidential staffers. They've wasted these monies on profligacy, consumption, and corruption. And so they have no hospital, no school, no major road project to show for that. So what we are saying is that, Mr. Kojo Oponkroma, enough of the semantics, enough of the deception, enough of the sophistry. Is Ghana's debt position today sustainable? Are we able to service our debts with ease like we were doing in the year 2016 before you guys took over? Have you kept your promise to reduce government borrowing? Have you invested the billions you have borrowed in any productive initiatives or projects that Ghanaians have benefited from and that can pay for these loans so that they don't become a burden for future generations?
Well, gentlemen, I'm grateful that you joined me. That is Sami Jingfi. He speaks for the NDC, the Communications Officer. Information Minister Kojo Oponkroma, you heard earlier. Still ahead here on Newsnight. Police in Accra pick up 2 suspects in connection with the violent clashes in the Ododododio constituency.
James South have been able to identify and arrest 2 persons whom we suspect had incited violence or they were part of the rioting that took place on Sunday.
Details as President Akufo-Addo condemns the clashes between supporters of the MPP and the NDC.
We want peace in Accra.
Meanwhile, as the 2020 election campaign gets heated, the 2 major political parties have pitched camps in the Greater Accra region. We'll tell you where they have been to and what they have been saying. Also tonight, Cocobot summons LBCs across the country following Joy News documentary, which revealed how some of the companies are passing off ordinary cocoa as high-grade cocoa.
Obviously, nobody will be happy to hear those news. The buyer won't be happy, and the regulator won't be happy. So it is important that I listen to those LBCs mentioned.
Details as certification standards body Rainforest Alliance bans for life one of the key auditors implicated in the Joy News documentary, Robbing the Poor. More in business later.
And IMF is denying classifying Ghana as CPIC. We have details for you at 6:30.
And in sports,
we'll hear from former Ghana goalkeeper Ali Jara, who is bemoaning the lack of support for disability sports.
Details after the break.